So welcome to our third week of Gems of Divine Mysteries. Let me recap where we are up to this point. One way to look at the overall scheme of this short work is to see it as Baha'u'llah solving a problem, or kind of two related problems. And the solution to these related problems is the same. The two related problems are the problem of the diversity of religion, that there are so many different religious beliefs in the world, so many different ways of thinking about God, so many different ways that the path towards God has been charted out in laws and ordinances. And the related problem is the problem that each religious tradition has some sense of expectation about something to come, and it's more or less clear in different faith traditions. In Christianity, it's very clear, the idea of the return of Jesus. In Shiite Islam, it's also very clear, the idea of the return of the 12th Imam. There's also in Sunni Islam the notion also of a return, although that community is, I think, less centered around its identity in terms of expectation. But the theme of expectation is nearly universal. And the problem there is that when that expected prophet comes, they are rejected because they don't come in the way that they're expected. And there's an assumption, of course, hidden in that statement, and the assumption is that there is a succession of prophets, and that the coming of each prophet is in some way a fulfillment of past expectation. And so Baha'u'llah is taking this problem up, and the way he's answering it is so beautiful and so eloquent and so implicit. He's taking in one part of this book, he's taking an existing format, this format of mystical journey, which has been around for centuries and which is interpreted as a very personal ascent through different stages. And Baha'u'llah takes this idea of mystical journey and he reinterprets it to suit the solution to this particular problem. He reinterprets the idea of mystical journey so that we're not talking anymore of just one individual's ascent through different spiritual stages. We're talking about the different stages in the mystical journey being a proxy for the diversity of the human race, of the different ways that humans throughout history have thought about the divine and related to the divine. And in the last couple of weeks, we've looked at how Baha'u'llah has introduced this topic, and it can be thought of as kind of a two-part document, really. And we concluded the first part last week. The first part introduces this problem of the understanding of Scripture, because the problem, as you know, the phrase that you hear repeated throughout this book is the problem of change and transformation, and the way it was. We don't have the exact wording of the question as it was related to Baha'u'llah, but the question had something to do with how is it that the promised one that we sought with all of these very specific characteristics could be transformed into this other being who claims to be the fulfillment of these prophecies, but doesn't seem to check all the boxes. Yeah. So how do you understand that sort of change and transformation? So in the first couple of sessions, we looked at how Baha'u'llah introduces the problem of reading sacred scriptures, and the reason why there's this problem throughout the ages of accepting a new prophet when they arise is because people have a certain way of reading their scriptures which ends up being unnecessarily literal. And so Baha'u'llah is providing keys to the interpretation of scripture which gently provide non-literal angles into their understanding. And he says, he has to also take off a possible answer off the table. And one possible answer is, well, the scriptures themselves are somehow corrupted. And so when the next prophet comes, the reason why they come contrary to expectation is because the original scriptures didn't get it right and aren't correctly giving the prophecy. And Baha'u'llah takes that option off the table. And in light of Baha'u'llah's overall project in the world, which is to unite the different religions and tribes of humanity, that's the wise option, because you want to be able to approach all of the sacred scriptures of the world as at some level being equally valid to each other. And you can't do that if you accept that this argument of corruption, which is one way of trying to solve the problem. And Baha'u'llah has to finesse this, because some of the Islamic sources, which are considered authoritative by Muslims, bring out this problem of corruption. And he refers to this as it's in some of the more technical paragraphs that we might have read through more quickly. But there are certain statements attributed to the Imams of Islam that refer to the corruption of the sacred texts. So Baha'u'llah doesn't want to say they were wrong, because he can't do that either. But he basically, he has to kind of finesse the question and say that you can't say that God would, on the one hand, have this expectation for humanity that they accept him, and on the other hand, remove the possibility of accepting him by not giving them the sacred scripture that's required to be able to fulfill that recognition. So Baha'u'llah moves from this question of scriptures having to be interpreted in a non-literal way to what the spiritual prerequisites of the understanding of scripture are. And the spiritual prerequisites have to do with purity of heart and a number of other virtues, which one could say we begin with this week, where Baha'u'llah describes these spiritual prerequisites in terms of the wayfarer's journey. And the wayfarer's journey, beginning in paragraph 35, or paragraph 36. One will note, if one has already read or been exposed to Baha'u'llah's Seven Valleys, a near identity between the valleys described here and those described in the Seven Valleys, although there are differences, and the differences themselves are quite important, because it tells us also that any particular delineation of valleys or stages is always a function of time and place, and has something to do with the hearer and the context, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all way of describing it, which is true for all parties. And so the fact that there are minor differences is itself a very powerful and implicit argument for not being too literalistic, not being too rigid in one's reading and understanding of it. However, we do find in the first two of these gardens or cities or valleys, they're not called valleys in this book. They're called, we start off with the Garden of Search and proceed to the City of Love and Rapture, the City of Divine Unity, and so forth. So there's a cluster of paragraphs which I think is going to be, are so beautiful and so rich in content. I think it'd be great if we could read them all through, maybe pause at the end of each paragraph for comment. And then we get to a point where Baha'u'llah makes a digression, and then we might be able to speed up a little bit at that point. But for the next cluster of paragraphs, up to say paragraph 50, I think it'd be great to read these through.
Starting at 36?
Starting at 36. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Know thou of a truth that the seeker at the beginning of his quest for God entered the garden of search. In this journey, it behooveth the wayfarer to detach himself from all save God, and to close his eyes to all that is in the heavens and on earth. There must not linger in his heart either the hate or the love of any soul, to the extent that they would hinder him from attaining the habitation of the celestial beauty. He must sanctify his soul from the veils of glory, and refrain from boasting of such worldly vanities, outward knowledge, or other gifts as God may have bestowed upon him. He must search after the truth to the utmost of his ability and exertion, that God may guide him in the paths of his favor and the ways of his mercy. For he verily is the best of helpers unto his servants. He saith, and verily speaketh the truth. Whoso maketh efforts for us in our ways, shall we assuredly guide him. And furthermore, fear God, and God will give you knowledge. I actually did have a question here that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of fear. Is fear literally translated here? Is that the word fear at the end of 26,
Mm-hmm.
note 26? Or are there nuances to the word fear in Arabic?
Mm-hmm.
Just as like there are nuances to knowledge, or just as there are...
Fortunately, we have the text here.
Or did some goofy translator just decide to just...
Yes, so this is attaqullah. Ya'allamakum Allah. So attaqu is it's not the same as khafa, which is like the real sort of fear, like terror fear.
Catholic fear?
Yeah. Fear of the fiery pit kind of fear.
I grew up Catholic.
This is interesting actually, because it's from the same root as taqwa, which has been translated in the Baha'i writings as fear of God or God-fearingness. It's also been translated as righteousness. It's also been translated as piety. And so if you look in the dictionary, like the Arabic dictionary, for the root of this word, you're going to find all three of these as kind of related meanings. And so by fear here is also meant sort of the pious, sort of piety and righteousness. But not like terror, not like existential terror. In we'll just read the next paragraph, because those two paragraphs conclude his description of the Garden of Search. He says, in this journey, the seeker becometh witness to a myriad changes and transformations, confluences and divergences. He beholdeth the wonders of divinity and the mysteries of creation, and discovereth the paths of guidance and the ways of his Lord. Such is the station reached by them that search after God, and such are the heights attained by those who hasten unto him. So one attribute of this first stage is becoming witness to a myriad changes and transformations. One way that I've found useful in reading through these various stages is to ask the question relating to each valley. What is the relationship between the lover and the beloved at each stage? Is it a relationship of unity, of tension, of ignorance, and another way to put it is, what's the relationship between the subject doing the searching and the object of the search? So it's set up in the beginning as a kind of relationship between opposites. And in the beginning of the search, there isn't even an awareness that there's an object of search. So you could say there's a valley 0, which is like the valley of those who aren't yet searching before they enter the valley of search.
Valley of the oblivious.
The valley of the oblivious, just to complete sort of the logical picture of it. And then when you enter into the valley of search, that's like the first dawning of the awareness of this object of one's search. One hasn't yet approached it. One hasn't yet come into any sort of relationship with it, but there's a sense of the existence of the other. And then we'll see in the next valley that awareness of the other, the awareness of, there's a goal to my search. There's something that I want to go after. In the next valley, that becomes the valley of love, when it's very interesting, because in the West, we think of love as a very pleasant thing. But the way Baha'u'llah describes the Valley of Love, both here in Gems of Divine Mysteries and also in parallel in the Seven Valleys, is not in such positive terms.
It's vacillating.
It's painful.
Yeah.
Because the Valley of Love, at least in this mystical sense, could, I suppose, be more accurately described the Valley of unrequited love. Or not that the beloved doesn't love lover, but that they haven't yet been able to consummate their love.
I thought it was more, to me, when I read it as well, I felt it was more like you're confused. You're just all over the place. Your emotions, because, well, when we read it, we'll see. Like,
Let's read it.
You're just vacillating through all these emotions.
Baha'u'llah also says this about the value of search. On this journey, the wayfarer dwelleth in every abode, however humble, and resideth in every land. In every face he seeketh the beauty of the friend. In every region he searcheth after the beloved. He joineth every company, and seeketh fellowship with every soul, that haply in some heart he may discern the secret of the beloved, or in some face behold the beauty of the adored one. And if by the help of the Creator he findeth on this journey a trace of the traceless friend, and inhaleth the fragrance of the long-lost Joseph from the heavenly herald, he shall straightway step into the valley of love and be consumed in the fire of love. That's from the Seven Valleys. Let's hear the Gems of Divine Mysteries version of it.
Should I read 38?
Yeah, thank you.
When once the seeker hath ascended unto this station, he will enter the city of love and rapture, whereupon the winds of love will blow and the breezes of the spirit will waft. In this station, the seeker is overcome by the ecstasies of yearning and the fragrance of longing, that he discerneth not his left from his right, nor doth he distinguish land from sea, or desert from mountain. At every moment he burneth with the fire of longing, and is consumed by the onslaught of separation in this world. He speedeth through the Paran of love, and traverseth the Horeb of rapture. Now he laugheth, now he weepeth sore, now he repulseth in peace, now he trembleth in fear. Nothing can alarm him, not can thought his purpose, and no law can restrain him. He standeth ready to obey whatsoever his Lord should please to decree, or as to his beginning and his end. With every breath he layeth down his life and offereth up his soul. He bareth his breast to meet the darts of the enemy. He raiseth his head to greet the sword of destiny. Nay, rather he kisseth the hand of his would-be murderer, and surrendereth his all. He yieldeth up spirit, soul, and body in the path of the Lord, and yet he doeth so by the leave of his beloved, and not of his own whim and desire. Thou findest him chill in the fire and dry in the sea, abiding in every land and treading every path. Whosoever toucheth him in this state will perceive the heat of his love. He walketh with the heights of detachment and traverseth the veil of renunciation. His eyes are ever expectant to witness the wonders of God's mercy, and eager to behold the splendors of his beauty. Blessed indeed are they that have attained unto such a station, for this is the station of the ardent lover and his enraptured souls.
Abdu'l-Baha said something interesting about this to George Winterburn in 1904. So it's considered hearsay, but for what it's worth, Abdu'l-Baha said the first entrance into light and into belief is extremely difficult. The spiritual birth is troublesome and painful in the same degree as the physical birth. In reality, the two births are alike. So Baha'u'llah also quotes this beautiful passage about chill in hellfire and dry in the sea in the Seven Valleys, and then he follows that with a little bit more. He says, love accepteth no existence and wisheth no life. In death it seeth life, and in shame it seeketh glory. To merit the madness of love, one must abound in sanity. To merit the bonds of the friend, one must be free in spirit. Blessed the neck that is caught in his noose, and happy the head that falleth on the dust in the path of his love. And then more on this sort of idea of having to be alive, free in spirit. He quotes a bit of a passage from a poem of Sana'i, a Persian poet. Ne'er will love allow a living soul to tread its way. Ne'er will the falcon deign to seize a lifeless prey. So the falcon never goes after a dead mouse. You know, it's only going to he's only going to sort of swoop on the thing if it's moving.
Right.
And it's the same thing with God. Never will love allow a living soul to tread its way. The word living here could also mean one that's full of ego. That's another meaning for that. Love setteth a world aflame at every turn, and layeth waste every land where it raiseth its banner. Being hath no existence in its kingdom. The wise wield no command within its realm. The Leviathan of love swalloweth the master of reason, and slayeth the Lord of knowledge. It drinketh the seven seas, but its heart's thirst is still unquenched, and it asketh, is there yet any more?
Is that the same poet, or is that?
That was Baha'u'llah.
Baha'u'llah?
Yeah, in the Seven Valleys. So in the Seven Valleys, he describes the next transition as, and if confirmed by the Creator, the lover escapeth the claws of the eagle of love, he will enter the realm of knowledge and come out of doubt into certitude, and turn from the darkness of wayward desire to the guiding light of the fear of God. Again, it's the same word here, with the same root. So let's hear Gems of Divine Mysteries on knowledge. So this is the interesting thing, is that it goes straight from love and rapture to divine unity, skipping the valley of knowledge.
Oh. But it does talk about knowledge, though, in City of Unity.
Yes.
There are bits and pieces in there.
Yes. So it's possible. And elsewhere, in another one of Baha'u'llah's shorter mystical tablets, instead of knowledge, it becomes the valley of detachment. So there's some variation here. And sometimes it's, as you point out, it's kind of folded into the next valley. So the valley of unity, which is what we're going to enter into, is going to be sort of technically where we stay until paragraph 95.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
So
All right, so negate me through 95.
if you skip through to 95, you see it goes to wonderment. And so, but in the middle of so there's a lot on divine unity here, but then there's a digression that goes into, why was Muhammad rejected, and then we sort of return to some of the themes that we saw in the first part of the book, and then it comes back to the theme of unity. But I think as we read through these paragraphs, we'll see why so much time is spent in the Valley of Unity here, because it's central to the answer to the question. How do you explain the sort of the change and transformation? How do you change that which comes contrary to expectation? And Baha'u'llah says basically you have to see through the eye of unity. But in doing so, he's not saying this is the only correct way to see things. And that's like the beauty of Baha'u'llah's answer, because he understands people are different. And some people are always going to see through what he calls the eye of distinction. They're always going to see the differences. And others are always going to see the unity underneath. And Baha'u'llah says it's all good. It's like this is like part of the irreducible diversity of the human race and of the spiritual path. But unless you really understand this standpoint of unity, you'll never understand Baha'u'llah's mission in the world as it relates to finding a point of unity for all the faith traditions, finding a point of unity around which all the prophets can be seen as circling around one fundamental truth. But you can only do that through the eye of unity. And from the perspective of the eye of unity, that's the only thing that makes sense. But from the perspective of the earlier valleys, if someone is talking in terms of unity, it's nonsense. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, but they're so different. It's like this one says don't eat beef, and this one says don't eat pork, and this one says you can marry this number of wives, and this one says you can marry this number of wives. This one doesn't even talk about God, and this one talks about nothing but God. How can these possibly be unified? How can there be, not just the social teachings, but the theological fundamentals seem to be very different. And that's through the eye of distinction. And Baha'u'llah is not denying that. He's not saying that that's not the case either. Mm-hmm. But to really understand his mission in the world, and to really, for humanity to get where it needs to go in the next stage of its journey on this planet, we have to be able to see more through the eye of divine unity. So let's start
39.
going into 39.
And when this stage of the journey is completed, and the wayfarer hath soared beyond his lofty station, he entereth the city of divine unity, and the garden of oneness, and the court of detachment. In this plain the seeker casteth away all signs, illusions, veils, and words, and beholdeth all things with an eye illumined by the effulgent lights which God himself hath shed upon him. In his journey he seeth all differences return to a single word, and all illusions culminate in a single point. Unto this beareth witness he who sailed upon the ark of fire, and followed the inmost path to the pinnacle of glory in the realm of immortality. Knowledge is one point, which the foolish have multiplied. This is the station that hath been alluded to in the traditions. I am he, himself, and he is I, myself, except that I am, and he is, that he is.
The second one, I am he himself, and he is myself, except that I am, and he is, that he is also quoted by the Bab in one of his commentaries. I think it's his commentary on a hadith, on the tradition of truth. Maybe it's the same hadith that this is quoting from.
Hadith is from the Islamic.
It's an Islamic tradition, which is an oral tradition, which is regarded as less certain than the Quran itself, which is considered as the only certain record of Muhammad's words. But the Quran itself is fairly short in the scheme of things, and the number of hadith go into the dozens of volumes, and they represent records of, it was heard from so and so, who heard it from so and so, who heard it from so and so, who heard the Prophet, blessed be he, say the following. And these hadith typically are related in that kind of sense. They have something called an esnad, which is like the chain of authorities which link it back to something which the Prophet was reported to have said. But over the centuries following Muhammad's death, volumes and volumes and volumes of these hadith appeared, and it's not clear which ones are relate to things that Muhammad actually said. And there are people who spend their entire careers as scholars of hadith that try to assess the relative reliability or otherwise of hadith within Islam. And the Shiites have different hadith than the Sunnis in general, although they might share some of them. And Baha'u'llah quotes from them extensively. So for Baha'is at least have a small number of hadith that they would regard as reliable, and those are the ones that Baha'u'llah quotes from. So if Baha'u'llah quotes it, then okay. Then that's kind of good enough for the Baha'is anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to question that piece of it.
But there's a huge amount of hadith out there. And
At the very beginning, we were talking about this problem of consistent affirmation of the truthfulness of the scriptures, even though there's multiple different scriptures. Is hadith considered scripture? Is Baha'u'llah having to deal with the challenge of explaining, because all of these little links go back somehow, sort of, maybe, to the Prophet? He has to somehow vindicate those?
That is part of his challenge, and it emerged in the last week, I think, or the week before that, where Baha'u'llah is addressing the fact that some of the hadith talk about the corruption of the text, for example. And even though that might not be considered at the same level as divinely revealed scripture itself, it still is quite influential in Islamic thought. Certain hadith are almost universally considered as having the ring of truth, and others are great barriers to the acceptance of any notion of divine revelation after Muhammad. Although the principal verse that is perhaps the biggest roadblock in getting past Muhammad as getting past the idea of finality in Islam, to be able to open the door to there being something after Islam. That greatest roadblock verse actually exists in the Quran itself, and so that's a matter of scripture, the seal of the prophets. And Baha'u'llah has an explanation, an answer to that, more in the Kitab-i-Iqan than in Gems of the Divine Mysteries, although it's alluded to in Gems of the Divine Mysteries, as we will see actually in just a couple of paragraphs. Shall we do 40?
In this station, where he, who is the embodiment of the end, to say, verily, I am the point of beginning, he would indeed be speaking the truth, and were he to say, I am other than him, this would be equally true. Likewise, were he to proclaim, verily, I am the Lord of heaven and earth, or the King of kings, or the Lord of the realm above, or Muhammad, or Ali, or the descendants, or aught else, he would indeed be proclaiming the truth of God. He verily ruleth over all created things, and standeth supreme above all beside him. Hast thou not heard what hath been said aforetime? Muhammad is the first, Muhammad is the last, Muhammad are all. And elsewhere, they all proceed from the same light.
So this theme of the unity of the prophets is the central point of the next few paragraphs. So we could probably keep on reading unless we want to pause to comment on any particular thing in this paragraph.
In this station, the truth of the unity of God and of the signs of his sanctity is established. Thou shalt indeed see them all rising above the bosom of God's might and embraced in the arms of his mercy. Nor can any distinction be made between his bosom and his arms. To speak of change or transformation in this plane would be sheer blasphemy and utter impiety. For this is the station wherein the light of divine unity shineth forth, and the truth of his oneness is expressed, and the splendors of the everlasting morn are reflected in lofty and faithful mirrors. By God, were I to reveal the full measure of that which he hath ordained for this station, the souls of men would depart from their bodies. The inner realities of all things would be shaken in their foundations. They that dwell within the realms of creation would be dumbfounded, and those who move in the lands of illusion would fade into utter nothingness.
Hast thou not heard? No change is there in God's creation. Hast thou not read? No change canst thou find in God's mode of dealing. Hast thou not borne witness to the truth? No difference wilt thou see in the creation of the God of mercy. Yea, by my Lord, they that dwell within this ocean, they that ride upon this ark, witness no change in the creation of God, and behold no differences upon his earth. And if God's creation be not prone to change and alteration, how then could they who are the manifestations of his own being be subject to it? Immeasurably exalted is God, above all that we may conceive of the revealers of his cause, and immensely glorified is he, beyond all that they may mention in his regard. Great God, this sea hath laid up lustrous pearls in store. The wind hath raised a wave that casteth them ashore. So put away thy robe and drown thyself therein, and cease to boast of skill. It serveth thee no more. What I love about this is how Baha'u'llah is just like declaring by fiat something which, to everyone's everyday experience is not the case. In our everyday experience, the world is resolved into atoms. If there's one thing you can take away from the whole project of science over the last 400, 500 years, it would be that everything's made up of atoms. It's one of the most profound and true descriptions of the world that we inhabit, is that you can break it up into parts, and those parts can be broken up into parts, and there are irreducible parts out of which the universe is made. And Baha'u'llah is saying here over and over, just kind of drilling the point home. There is no change. There is no transferring. This idea that this prophet is different than this prophet, he's saying, no. He's saying, they're all the same. But how do you see that? I mean, you can't, if you're looking with the eyes of your everyday eyes, it's a nonsense statement. You have to open some other eye to be able to realize that it's all one. And that's
really difficult.
Contemplative mind.
yeah, in a way, that's the essence of the spiritual journey, is there's something extraordinarily counterintuitive about it. Because our intuition and what works in the world is there's competition, and there's me and you, and and if you didn't navigate the world in that way, you wouldn't last very long. So
But maybe over
how can
time,
he come and say that's all wrong?
But maybe over time, just like we recognize, the only thing that's useful is when the atoms are brought together. As an atom, they're actually useless. Like a single individual atom doesn't do something for us. But when they're brought together, then they have a purpose. Their purpose is fulfilled. So maybe once the religions come together, the purpose will be fulfilled.
If thou be of the inmates of this city,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake.
44.
if thou be of the inmates of this city, within the ocean of divine unity, thou wilt view all the prophets and messengers of God as one soul and one body, as one light and one spirit, in such wise that the first among them would be last, and the last would be first. For they have all arisen to proclaim his cause, and have established the laws of divine wisdom. There are, one and all, the manifestations of his self, the repositories of his might, the treasuries of his revelation, the dawning places of his splendor, and the day springs of his light. Through them are manifested the signs of sanctity in the realities of all things, and the tokens of oneness and the essences of all beings. Through them are revealed the elements of glorification in the heavenly realities, and the exponents of praise in the eternal essences. From them hath all creation proceeded, and unto them shall return all that has been mentioned. And since in their inmost beings they are the same luminaries and the self-same mysteries, thou shouldst view their outward conditions in the same light, that thou mayest recognize them all as one being, may find them united in their words, speech, and utterance. Wow.
For me, this paragraph is the heart, kind of the heart of the volume. It's the essence of Baha'u'llah's answer to the problem.
And
But
what's so neat is like when you actually read this and you go back and read other religious scriptures with this lens, you see it.
Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I found. Like
It's
I
like
told
a
you last
filter.
week
Yeah.
when I read, maybe the week before, Thessalonians.
Yeah.
Once you go back and read scripture after you've read Abdul Baha, then you start to see whole other things that you did not notice before in those scriptures.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
The scriptures bring, past scriptures bring stuff that the Baha'i writings, you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
it's amazing. The vast conversation.
Yeah.
This is a great example of like apparent contradiction. Is God to be seen through the unity of everything, as in the Valley of Unity, or is God to be seen in all of the various colors and beautiful diversity of things? Is this an either or? Niels Bohr said something. One of the architects of quantum mechanics said something really profound about this, because he understood. He was the first to understand that particles and waves are two different frameworks by which one can describe elementary matter. And he said once that everyday truths are the things whose opposite are falsehoods. 2 plus 2 equals 4, or 2 plus 2 equals -4. No, that's a falsehood. He said, but the deeper truths are such that their opposites are also deep truths.
Say that again.
He said the deepest truths are such that their opposites are also truths. That was Niels Bohr, yeah. And he was thinking in terms of quantum mechanics, but I think it also applies in the spiritual domain. And this is one example where it applies. Seeing through the eye of unity and all these wonderful things that Baha'u'llah is saying about it in this valley, this is the only way to really apprehend the oneness of the prophets, is by just tossing overboard all of the differences and just completely ignoring them. But then on the other hand, there's another way of looking at the world which sees the differences and maybe even revels in them, and maybe even understands the differences as being a feature of the beauty of the world. The diversity of things is beautiful. A field of flowers, Abdu'l Baha used to love saying, is much more beautiful if it's flowers of different colors. If it was just one color, how much more boring that would be. And so that's one example of how, and Shoghi Effendi describes it as like there's a sphere and there are poles, there are truths which are on opposite poles. In between are the meridian lines that connect it, but there are opposite poles to certain spiritual truths. I mean, another example of it, and all of these ideas, all of these either ors, almost all of them were originally figured out by the ancient Greeks. I mean, the problem of the one and the many, that goes to the pre-Socratics. But in terms of more, let's say, Christian theology or Judeo-Christian Islamic theology, there's the idea of God being transcendent, out there somewhere, unimaginably great, mighty, powerful, and the God that's within. Turn thy sight unto thyself, Baha'u'llah says, that thou mayest find me standing within thee, mighty, powerful, and self-subsisting. So the God without and the God within is another polarity. And you don't have to say, well, one is true and one is false.
Yeah.
In a way, they're opposites,
Yeah.
but they're both equally true.
Yeah.
The seen and the hidden and the manifest is another set of polarities that Baha'u'llah loves quoting this. He's the first and the last. He is the seen and the hidden. He is the inner and the outer. He is the the inward and the outward. All of these are true of God.
Yeah.
He is everywhere visible in every atom, shining within every atom are the names and attributes of God. But at the same time, God is essentially hidden. So which is it? Is he seen or is he hidden? And Baha'u'llah affirms all of these polarities. He says he's all of these things simultaneously.
Worth thou to consider in this station, the last of them to be the first, or conversely, thou wouldst indeed be speaking, or conversely, thou wouldst indeed be speaking the truth. This hath been ordained by him who is the wellspring of divinity and the source of lordship. Say, call upon God or call upon the All-Merciful, by whichsoever name you will, invoke him, for he hath most excellent names. For they are all the manifestations of the name of God, the dawning places of his attributes, the repositories of his might, and the focal points of his sovereignty. While God magnified be his might and glory, is in his essence sanctified above all names and exalted beyond even the loftiest attributes. Consider likewise the evidence of divine omnipotence, both in their souls and in their human temples, that thine heart may be assured, and that those mayest be of them that speed through the realms of the nearness.
His name.
I shall restate here my theme, that perchance this may assist thee in recognizing thy Creator. Know thou that God, exalted and glorified be he, doth in no wise manifested in his essence and reality. From time immemorial he hath been veiled in the eternity of his essence, and concealed in the infinitude of his own being. And when he proposed to manifest his beauty in the kingdom of names, and to reveal his glory in the realm of attributes, He brought forth his prophets from the invisible plane to the invisible, that his name, the magnificent, might be distinguished from the hidden, and his name, the last night, might be discerned from the first, and that there may be fulfilled, the words, he is the first and the last, the seen and the hidden, and he knoweth all things. Thus hath he revealed these most excellent names in the most exalted words, and the manifestations of himself in the mirrors of his being.
It is therefore established that all names and attributes return unto these sublime and sanctified luminaries. Indeed, all names are to be found in their names, and all attributes can be seen in their attributes. Viewed in this light, if thou wert to call them by all the names of God, this would be true, as all these names are one and the same as their own being. Comprehend then the intent of these words, and guard it within the tabernacle of thy heart, that thou mayest recognize the implications of thine inquiry. Fulfill them according to that which God hath ordained for thee, and thus be numbered with those who have attained unto his purpose.
All that thou hast heard regarding Muhammad, the son of Hassan, and this is not Muhammad, the revealer of the Quran, but the 12th Imam, so a few hundred years after. May the souls of all that are immersed in the oceans of the Spirit be offered up for his sake, is true beyond the shadow of a doubt, and we all verily bear allegiance unto him. But the Imams of the faith have fixed his abode in the city of Jabul-Qa, which they have depicted in strange and marvelous signs. To interpret this city according to the literal meaning of the tradition would indeed prove impossible, nor can such a city ever be found. Wert thou to search the uttermost corners of the earth, nay, probe its length and breadth, for as long as God's eternity hath lasted and his sovereignty will endure, thou wouldst never find a city such as they have described, for the entirety of the earth could neither contain nor encompass it. If thou wouldst lead me unto this city, I could assuredly lead thee unto this holy being, whom the people have conceived according to what they possess, and not to that which pertaineth unto him. Since this is not in thy power, thou hast no recourse but to interpret symbolically the accounts and traditions that have been reported from these luminous souls. And as such an interpretation is needed for the traditions pertaining to the aforementioned city, so too is it required for this holy being. When thou hast understood this interpretation, thou shalt no longer stand in need of transformation or aught else. So this is where Baha'u'llah comes, I think, most sort of directly to answering the question as it was related to us in the first class. The question was asking about transformation as regards the 12th Imam. How could the 12th Imam have been translated into the promised Mahdi of the Bab? Because the Bab claimed to be the return of the 12th Imam. But the Shiites believed that the 12th Imam resided in this incredible city that had, 1,000 gates and, was this many miles in circumference and so on and so forth. And they literally believed in this thing. Baha'u'llah says, look, if it couldn't fit on the surface of the earth, a city of the dimensions that are described. And so just as you have to interpret that city symbolically, you also have to interpret the 12th Imam symbolically and the return of the 12th Imam. Whether the 12th Imam even existed is a question of some historical ambiguity.
But do they teach that the Bab was the 12th Imam?
The Bab made various claims. In a sense, according to Baha'u'llah, they can all claim to be first and they can all claim to be last.
Yeah.
And so what precisely they claim to be is sort of what they feel like claiming in that moment. At one point, the Bab claimed to be the return of the 12th Imam, the promised Qa'im, the promised one of the Shi'is. But in Shiite theology, that promised Qa'im, the return of the 12th Imam, is not considered to have the same status of Muhammad, because Muhammad is the seal of the prophet. So they're not expecting another prophet, what Baha'is would call manifestation, to come on the same level as Muhammad and Jesus and so forth, because they believe prophecy was sealed with Muhammad. So nevertheless, they have this idea of prophetic expectation, but it's more like someone who will come and restore the faith of Islam. Someone who will be in the shadow of Muhammad in a sense. So when the Bab claimed his mission, initially he claimed to be the return of the 12th Imam. And later, as people were able to hear what he was saying, perhaps, and as the circle of his followers grew, he was able to more fully proclaim what he really was, which was a new manifestation, at the level of Muhammad. But that was such a taboo thing to declare that he didn't start off by declaring that. He started off by making a proclamation within the circumference of the prophetic expectation of Shiite Islam. And during the course of his 6-year ministry, very short, during the sort of the rapid evolution of that ministry, by the end of it, he was making the full declaration, which really shatters the whole edifice of Shiite theology, and shatters the whole idea of the finality of prophethood, both for Muhammad and for himself, really. And then, so that in the end, he was able to declare that he was a return of the Logos, in the sense of Jesus, in the sense of Buddha and others.
Is that what got him killed?
And that's what got him killed.
That's all I needed.
Stephen, wasn't that part of what was happening at the conference of Badash? After the martyrdom, where the believers were gathered, and the real truth of what the Bab was his mission was kind of emphasized, and some people said, this is not for me, and left at that time. Was that part of what that was about?
Yeah, was that after the martyrdom or before? That might have even been before the martyrdom.
The Bab was in prison at that time.
Yeah, he was in prison,
Okay,
so
right.
inaccessible.
48,
But yeah, that was the big question.
Yeah.
And during the Bab's lifetime, his followers themselves were debating, and they were in different camps, and they were kind of fighting each other, saying, "Hold on, is this a kind of rebirth of Islam, or is this a new religion entirely?" And the sort of the conservative camp among the Babis said, "No, the Bab is the promised Qa'im, and we're all Muslims here, and this is just renewal of the religion of Islam." Whereas the sort of the liberal wing, and Tahiri among them, famously, who appears before them all unveiled for the first woman unveiling is like tearing off all your clothes.
Literally.
I mean, to them, it was absolutely beyond the pale, and that was symbolic of this being a rupture, an actual rupture with Islam, and signalizing the opening of a new chapter and a new prophetic dispensation entirely.
And it was all orchestrated by Baha'u'llah.
And it was orchestrated behind the scenes by Baha'u'llah, according to the Dawnbreakers.
Interesting.
Not all the details of which are in the Dawnbreakers, as it has come down to us.
Should I read 41?
Yeah. Go for it.
Know then that inasmuch as all the prophets are but one and the same soul, spirit, name, and attribute, thou must likewise see them all as bearing the name Muhammad, as being the son of Hassan, as having appeared from the, how you say that?
From the Jabal Ka of God's power.
Jabal Ka of God's power, and from the Jabal Sa
Doesn't really matter. Yeah,
of mercy, for by Jabuka is meant none other than the treasure houses of eternity in the all-highest heaven, and the cities of the unseen in the spiritual realm. We bear witness that Muhammad the son of Hassan was indeed in Jabha, therefrom. Likewise, he whom God shall make manifest abideth in that city until such time as God will have established him upon the seat of his sovereignty. He verily acknowledged his truth, and bare allegiance unto each and every one of them. He hath chosen here to be brief in our elucidation of the meaning of Jabla, Happy of them that truly believe, thou shalt indeed comprehend all the true meaning of thy mysteries, enshrined within these tablets.
But as to him who appeared in the year 60, he standeth in need of neither transformation nor interpretation. For his name was Muhammad, and he was a descendant of the Imams of the faith. Thus it can be truly said of him that he was the son of Hassan, as is undoubtedly clear and evident unto thine eminence. Nay, he it is who fashioned that name and created it for himself, were ye to observe with the eye of God.
So look what Baha'u'llah slips in here. First of all, in this paragraph, he brings it all the way up to the Bab. Similarly, in the Kitab-i-Gan, it's mostly about Muhammad or prophecies of Jesus, but then he brings it up to sort of the present moment in a number of places and says, this also relates to our understanding of the claim of the Bab. But look what Baha'u'llah slips in the previous paragraph. Likewise, he whom God shall make manifest abideth in that city until such time as God will have established him upon the seat of his sovereignty. Baha'u'llah is referring to himself now. He's saying, I also live in Jabal Gha. I also live in this city. So it's completely a metaphorical thing. Yeah.
Like this place of seclusion where they wait for the moment when they...
Yeah. All right. That's probably
This
good.
is a good place.
This is our stopping point.
In the year 60, what does that translate?
Oh, 1260. So the year 1260 AH is an important year for the Shiite Muslims because the year of the supposed disappearance of the 12th Imam was the year 260 AH. So there was a succession. There was Muhammad, and then there were 4 rightly guided. There was caliphs, and there were imams, and the final end of the final imam died without issue, without a child, without an heir, in 260 AH. So that for the Shiite Muslims is the beginning of this 1,000-year period of absence, to be followed by the return of that imam after that 1,000-year period. But it's 1,000 lunar years, and so the year 1260 in the lunar calendar was a great year of prophetic expectation for many of the Shiites. The year 1260 AH is the year 1844 in the Gregorian calendar, which was also a great year of prophetic expectation for entirely different reasons among Christians.
Right.
By doing some numerology on some prophecies of Daniel in the Old Testament, people came up to the year 1844. The Millerites were one group. My great grandmother, several times removed, her name was Jeanette Preston, and she was a member of one of the founding families of the Millerites. And my mother, who's really into genealogy, dug around and found a little brief statement.
Isn't your mother's name Jeanette?
It's also Jeanette that says that when she was a child of something 6 or 9, did I say this last week?
No, you just said it to me.
I said to you, she put away her dolls and childish things to await the coming of the Lord in 1844.
You told us all.
And they had done the numbers, and they came up with early 1844, and there was a great disappointment.
Moved to Haifa, awaiting him.
Yeah, they're still
Yes,
sitting
they
there.
moved to Haifa, and over the lintel of
They're
one
still
of the
sitting there.
doors.
And they're looking across the shrine. They're looking at
1844.
the shrines like, I
Yeah.
don't get it. I don't see it.
When is he coming?
Wow.
Anyway.
When?
Thank you guys.
Oh.